The voicemail lasted less than 20 seconds, but investigators would replay it so many times that the sound of breathing became impossible to forget. At first, all you could hear was movement. Fabric brushing against a phone, a shaky inhale, the faint creak of a car door. Then a woman's voice whispered something so quietly it almost disappeared beneath the static. "He found me again." The line went dead right after that. When police later searched through Mary Gingles' phone records, they found screenshots of threatening messages, photos of strange cars parked outside her home, and notes she had written to herself late at night when she was too afraid to sleep. One note simply said, "If anything happens to me, it was never random." And somehow, despite everything she reported, despite every warning sign screaming in plain sight, nobody stopped what was coming. Mary Gingles had spent months living like someone being hunted. Friends said she rarely parked in the same spot twice anymore, and before walking into her Tamarack neighborhood, she would sit inside her car and stare into the mirrors for long stretches of time, almost like she expected someone to emerge from the darkness behind her. At first, people assumed the stress was coming from her separation and the custody battle consuming her life. But then Mary began showing them things that were harder to explain away. Anonymous messages, threats sent from fake numbers, photos taken outside her house that she never remembered posing for, and eventually, something even worse, small GPS trackers hidden underneath her car. The discovery shattered whatever sense of safety she had left. She photographed everything carefully, documenting dates, screenshots, suspicious vehicles, strange encounters at traffic lights. She filed restraining orders. She contacted police repeatedly. Every new incident seemed more aggressive than the last, as though whoever was watching her wanted Mary to know they could reach her whenever they wanted. And according to people close to her, Mary kept saying the same terrifying sentence over and over again: "He's escalating." The problem was, escalation is hard to measure until somebody finally crosses the line. Mary's father had started sleeping at her home more often. Family members later said he didn't like leaving her alone anymore, especially after the threats became more graphic. The messages weren't just angry. They felt personal, calculated. Some referenced places Mary had visited only hours earlier. Others described clothing she had worn that same day. It created the horrifying realization that whoever was targeting her wasn't sitting far away behind a screen. They were close, watching, waiting. Neighbors noticed changes too. Mary stopped, lingering outside to chat. Curtains stayed closed even during daylight. One neighbor recalled seeing her quickly rush groceries inside while constantly looking over her shoulder, almost like she expected someone to pull into the driveway at any second. But what disturbed people most was how exhausted she looked. Fear had worn her down slowly over time, the way water erodes stone. And the scariest part about prolonged terror is that eventually, people around you start adjusting to it. The threats become background noise. The panic becomes routine. Until one day, routine turns deadly. Investigators would later uncover reports describing multiple encounters that seemed small individually but horrifying together. Someone repeatedly drove past Mary's house at slow speeds late at night. Unknown calls came from blocked numbers and hung up the moment she answered. A tracker was discovered, removed, and then another one allegedly appeared later. Mary documented everything with desperate precision, as though she was trying to build a case strong enough for someone to finally understand the danger she was in. But fear does strange things to perception. Some people around her quietly wondered if stress was amplifying the situation. Others believed the legal system would intervene eventually if the threat was truly serious. Mary, however, did not seem convinced by anyone's reassurance. According to those close to her, she had developed a habit of checking windows repeatedly before bed. She sometimes slept with lights on in different rooms to make the house appear occupied from every angle. And during one conversation with a friend, her voice reportedly cracked when she admitted something chilling. "I don't think he wants to scare me anymore," she said. "I think he wants me gone." The weeks leading up to February 16 felt unnervingly quiet, almost too quiet. Some of the threatening communication appeared to slow down, and for brief moments, Mary allowed herself to believe maybe the worst had passed. She focused on spending time with family. She tried creating some sense of normal life inside a home that no longer felt safe. but trauma leaves people hypersensitive to silence. When you've spent months expecting danger, calm can feel like the moment right before impact. Then there were the strange sightings. A neighbor later told investigators they noticed a vehicle lingering near the neighborhood more than once. Another person remembered seeing someone sitting inside a parked car for an unusually long time, engine running, lights off. At the time, none of it seemed dramatic enough to call emergency services. Looking back afterward, every tiny detail felt unbearable. Because hindsight has a cruel way of turning ordinary moments into warnings nobody recognized soon enough. Inside the house, Mary's father tried to keep everyone calm. He reportedly encouraged her to continue documenting incidents and reassured her that eventually authorities would take stronger action if the harassment continued. But reassurance can only stretch so far when somebody feels hunted every single day. Mary had allegedly become hyper-aware of sounds, doors closing outside, footsteps near windows, sudden movement in the driveway. Every noise pulled her attention instantly. One friend later described receiving messages from Mary that sounded increasingly hopeless. Not dramatic, not hysterical, just exhausted. She spoke like someone waiting for disaster to arrive because she no longer believed she had the power to stop it. And perhaps the most heartbreaking part was this. Mary had done many of the things people are told to do in dangerous situations. She reported threats, filed paperwork, collected evidence, asked for help repeatedly. Yet somehow, fear kept tightening around her life anyway, inch by inch, until there was almost no room left to breathe. The morning of February 16th did not begin with screaming or gunfire. It began quietly, normal enough that neighbors carried on with ordinary routines, completely unaware that violence was already moving toward them. Investigators later pieced together movements from surveillance cameras and witness accounts, creating a timeline that felt terrifyingly deliberate. A vehicle approached the Tamarack neighborhood, a figure arrived armed, and within moments, everything Mary had feared for months came crashing into reality. People nearby first described hearing sounds they struggled to identify, sharp cracks echoing through the neighborhood, then panic, then shouting. One witness recalled seeing movement near the house and realizing almost instantly that something catastrophic was unfolding. By the time emergency responders arrived, multiple victims had already been shot. Mary Gingles was among them. So was her father, and another innocent neighbor who never had the chance to understand why violence had suddenly exploded onto their street. In the aftermath, the neighborhood transformed into a landscape of flashing lights, crime scene tape, and disbelief. Residents stood outside staring at investigators moving through the property in silence, trying to process how a woman who had spent months warning everyone about danger had ended up dead exactly the way she feared. Detectives began collecting evidence immediately, and what they found painted the picture of someone who had not acted impulsively. This looked targeted, planned. As investigators dug deeper into Mary's records, the sheer volume of documented fear became impossible to ignore. Reports, screenshots, threat allegations, evidence of tracking devices, prior restraining orders. It wasn't a mystery whether Mary believed she was in danger. The mystery was how somebody allegedly capable of terrifying her for so long had remained free long enough for things to reach this point. And that question began haunting not only detectives, but the entire public watching the story unfold. Then came the detail that changed everything. Authorities began focusing heavily on the person Mary had reportedly feared most, her estranged husband, Roberto Gingles. The allegations surrounding him were deeply disturbing. According to reports and court records, Mary had repeatedly expressed fear that he would eventually kill her. Investigators alleged there had been escalating threats connected to their deteriorating relationship and custody battle. Suddenly, the trackers, the surveillance, the fear, the warnings, all of it started forming a horrifyingly coherent picture. But the twist investigators uncovered next made the story even darker. This wasn't just rage erupting in a single, uncontrollable moment. Authorities believed the attack had been methodical, intentional. The gunman allegedly arrived prepared, armed, and focused. And as detectives reconstructed the events of that day, they realized the neighbor killed in the attack may never have even been the intended target at all. He simply crossed paths with violence that had already chosen its destination long before arriving there. The more details emerged, the more unbearable the case became. Friends of Mary began speaking publicly about how desperately she had tried to protect herself. They described a woman trapped in constant psychological terror, trying to convince people that the danger surrounding her was real before it became irreversible. Some said Mary feared, not only for herself, but for everyone around her. She worried innocent people could get hurt simply for being near her. Investigators purportedly uncovered evidence suggesting the obsession had spiraled far beyond ordinary domestic conflict. This was control sharpened into fixation, fear weaponized. Over time, and perhaps the most haunting of all, was the realization that Mary appeared to understand the trajectory long before anyone else truly grasped it. Her warnings weren't vague. They were specific, direct. She had allegedly predicted exactly the kind of ending investigators were now standing inside of. By the end of the investigation, the horrifying truth finally stood exposed in full view. Authorities alleged that Mary Gingles had spent months trying to escape a man she believed was stalking and threatening her, and despite repeated warnings, despite documented fear, despite restraining orders and evidence she carefully preserved, the violence she feared ultimately arrived at her front door anyway. On February 16, 2025, investigators say Roberto Gingles came to the Tamarack home armed with deadly intent, killing Mary, her father, and an innocent neighbor before the nightmare finally ended. And when detectives later reviewed everything Mary had left behind, the screenshots, the reports, the trackers, the terrified messages to friends, one detail became impossible to shake. Mary had not been describing paranoia. She had been documenting a countdown. Piece by piece, she had recorded the approach of her own death while desperately hoping somebody would stop it before the final page was written. Long after the crime scene tape disappeared, neighbors still talked about the fear in Mary's eyes during those final months. The way she looked over her shoulder, the way she rushed inside, the way she kept trying to warn people that something terrible was coming. In the end, the most chilling part of the story was not that Mary predicted the danger. It was that she was right.